Your college football game day has come early.
Goes down the field for Sicky, goes up high. He's got get away from the top speed, and the ball is free. Woo! What a hit! You got barbecue back there?
From underdog triumphs to powerhouse showdowns, we've got your winning playbook covered. It's BetQLU with Chris Mack, RJ Choppy, and John Martin, presented by BetMGM. The sports book born in Vegas. Download the app today. Please gamble responsibly.
Week 7 is a big one in college football, and we're going to get you ready for it here on BetQLU, live coast to coast on the BetQL network every Friday night and Saturday morning alongside John Martin and RJ Choppy. You can also watch the show on the Odyssey Sports YouTube channel as well. And don't forget, download it in podcast form as soon as it's ready every single week by simply subscribing to BetQLU wherever you get your podcasts. We've got a top 5 matchup. We've got a couple of matchups that feel like they would usually be played in the Rose Bowl. We got a loser go home kind of matchup in the SEC on a Saturday night in a spot where one team almost never loses at home on a Saturday night. A lot to get to in week 7, boys, but let's start with week 6, which we thought was going to be a relatively uneventful week 6, right? And it ended up being week 6. The girl from your grandparents' church that you got introduced to and asked to take out on a date, and then you didn't get home till 4 in the morning because she was doing tequila shooters all night and drank you under the table. That's what week 6 ended up being. It was totally unexpected, but Bama loses to Vandy. Those that took Vandy Moneyline cashed it nearly 12-1. Tennessee shocked by Arkansas.
11 of those people that did it.
Yes, all
11.
Everybody on the board of trustees in Nashville. Missouri gets destroyed by the Aggies. Michigan lost to Washington. That one wasn't as utterly flabbergasting as some of the other results. USC lost to Minnesota. Miami had to furiously come back on the road at Berkeley to beat Cal. A 25-point second-half comeback. Some wild games last week, John, but it was we did not expect last week to be what last week was.
No, we didn't. And that's the beauty of college football, right? Is that you can see these matchups on paper and they play the games. And, I didn't get out unscathed. I had Cal second half. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I laid it second half with Cal minus 4.5 for the game. And I felt sharp. I felt like the sharpest SOB in the world. I'm like, it's 35-10. I laid 4.5 with Cal. And then 30 minutes later, I'm like, damn, how stupid can you be laying 4.5 with Cal? I mean, you got to be a real idiot. But you know what? You live and learn. I don't look at L's as L's. I look at them as lessons. No L's, just lessons. Right. I learned a lot last week about who to bet on and who to never bet on, and who to bet with when they're down 25 or more.
That was a bad weekend. That there is no other way to put it. If you're a fan of the favorites, it was a bad weekend. If you're a fan of upsets, it was heaven on earth. It was heaven on earth, and there was a lot of, you mentioned the Cal-Miami game. I mean, that was a game that never. I mean, how does a team lose up 3 scores with the ball with 10 minutes to go? That doesn't happen. And then it really showed the. What Nick Saban was 2 weeks early with his comments that, the SEC on the road is a hard place to live, except Vandy, and he was wrong on that one. But it's a hard place to live. And the road in college football, especially when you get in, as we get further into the transfer world where these guys don't play with each other every year for 4 straight years. They're a mishmash unit. Going on the road is not easy. And a lot Miami saved, they came away with the win. That's the most important thing at the end of the day. But most of these teams did not get that luck.
Yeah, the one that jumped out to me the most, guys, was Missouri getting absolutely manhandled by A&M. I did not see that one coming. That was an L, a lesson learned, not a loss, but
There
an
you go.
L for
There
me,
you go.
because I fully expected Missouri's offense would hit their stride at some point, and we saw them struggle for a couple weeks, and it was ugly. Like we've seen Mike Elko defenses do this to teams before. I didn't expect he would do it to Missouri last week, but that's one that I want to say all but takes Missouri out of playoff conversation. Like they're just not going to have a big enough win, I don't think, on their schedule the rest of the way, unless they should pull off an equally alarming upset of someone, maybe
Right.
Georgia. Those, or excuse me, Bama. But there are teams I think that played themselves out of conversations last week. Tennessee didn't; they're still alive. Obviously, Bama didn't; they're still alive. Obviously, but Choppy, it certainly feels like we're starting to get to the point where an unexpected loss, and we'll talk about a couple of SEC teams that can't afford them in just a little bit, but an unexpected loss will it'll mean something. They keep saying the regular season doesn't mean as much anymore. Losses from this point forward, if they're unexpected, will mean something. They will mean your playoff hopes are dashed.
Yeah, they will. The good news is if you're a team that lost, you get a do-over. That's just the reality of it. And I'll tell you, I went to bed Saturday night after Tennessee lost, and and this is not the first time that my school has had a bad loss. Trust me. But I had a weird feeling. I didn't know how to react because this is the first year of the 12-team playoff. Normally, you lose a game like that and you still got Bama and Georgia on your schedule. You're like, oh, God, well, season's over. Now you got a do-over. You have a built-in do-over. And that's great, but it also does diminish the regular season just a smidge. But it also helps it stay alive because how many teams had – normally their seasons end yesterday, but now they're still alive. So when your season's over, you check out. Ultimately, it's good long-term for the sport. And then these teams are going to have that second chance to not get – you get one more. Like you're going to be – if you're in the SEC or the Big Ten, you're going to get 2 losses for the most part. You'll get 2 losses and still find your way to have a chance to get in.
Yeah, let's talk about the playoff field, John, because we've got, I want to say 9 teams now. Hold on, I'm going to do some quick math on the air here because this is real exciting for people to listen to. 10 teams that are favored to make the playoff now at BetMGM. If we look at teams minus money as favorites to make the playoff, the typical teams that we expect to be a part of the conversation, a couple of whom we'll get to later, Ohio State, Oregon, Texas, Bama, Georgia, Miami, Penn State, Ole Miss still minus 130. Notre Dame minus 120 to make the playoff. Clemson back in the conversation at minus 115. But when we start to look at the dogs to make the playoff, in particular, Boise plus 125, Tennessee 110, A&M 140, Iowa State 170 is maybe the team to survive the Big 12. When you start looking for value, do you see any on teams on make the playoff bets right now?
I mean, I think of all of those, I would probably have to go with Boise, just because they have the clearest path in terms of, being one of the, the highest ranked, conference champions. They really just, it comes down to, beating UNLV. But I mean, at this point, you would definitely think that's happening. And then, of course, you'll see who you get in the championship game. But I mean, who's stopping this kid, Genty? Who's doing it? I mean, you tell me. I haven't seen a defense that's come close to. Oregon didn't do it. I mean, Utah State let that dude run for 190 in the first half, and they benched him. I mean, so it wasn't. I guess it wasn't 190. Maybe it was. Maybe it was 190 at 189. I don't know. I know people were upset because they took his over and he didn't play in the second half. But I just think they have the clearest path, and they play the worst schedule. And they will be the highest. One of the 5 highest ranked if they run the table and do what they're supposed to do. So, and I see no reason why they can't at this point. I mean, they have one real game left. That's UNLV, and I believe they play that game. Is it in Vegas? I'm not sure. I got to figure that out. It is in Vegas, so it is a road game, but that like 15,000 people go to those games, so it's not really that much of an advantage anyway. So I think Boise State would be the answer there.
It's Boise. He's right. They got good odds at plus 125, right? So it's better than what you would get on, say, Tennessee. So much better odds. They have a much more favorable schedule. The odds are slightly worse than A&M, but A&M still got to play Texas. A&M's got a much tougher slate. So I think Boise's the answer if you're asking on which plus team is going to wind up making it in. I mean, now you're going to have other teams. Ole Miss they're not going to have an easy road the rest of the way, and they've got it's not a great loss. The loss on their schedule. Notre Dame is the interesting one because what is that loss going to be like? Now the A&M win looks like it's going to be pretty decent, but that loss, I mean, Northern Illinois could very easily by next week have lost 3 games. They very easily when they play Bowling Green. So like that loss is not good for Notre Dame.
You're right, but as we originally looked at their schedule, as it stacked up at the beginning of the season, I think we looked at the NIU loss and said, well, there's no way to bounce back from this, right? Mm-hmm. But to your point, like the win over Louisville, okay, it's by a touchdown. It's at home. It's not necessarily going out of its way to impress anybody, but the win at College Station is a good one. And all of a sudden, they've got games like Army and Navy are all of a sudden legit, like both of them. And they got a weird scenario in the AAC where they may end up playing for the AAC title game and then playing the Army-Navy game a week later, which would be wild.
Right.
But Notre Dame's got both of them, and Navy's on the road. Those might actually end up being decent wins. It's not knock your socks off fantastic, John, but Notre Dame gets through this season with just one loss, and it's an ugly one to NIU, but they've got wins at College Station and at Annapolis, plus a win over Army and maybe a win on the road at USC for whatever USC may be at the end of the season. I mean, that's probably enough to get you in as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I think if you're a watcher of college football, and I would hope that the committee is, then you would know just how good Navy and Army both are. I mean, I know they're not ranked and they're not a Power 5 team, but just watch them and look what they're doing. Look at the margin that they're winning with. Now, granted, it's not like it's happening against Tennessee and Texas and Oklahoma. I get that, but I mean, they're crushing these teams. I mean, Navy beat Air Force, bad last weekend. Bad. I mean, it was front to back every which way, So, I think both those teams are actually quality wins if Notre Dame, and I'm not even sure that they will beat both. I mean, that's, there's a chance they could lose one of those two, so I really do. I think, if they are able to get through that 2-0, then it's going to be very impressive. And I do think the committee will look at it that way as well.
Current projections, Choppy, have 3 Big Ten teams, 2 ACC teams, and as I count them, 1, 2, 3, 4 SEC teams, unless I'm missing somebody, plus Notre Dame, plus a group of 5. I don't know if I'm buying this 2 teams from the ACC thing. I understand Clemson's only loss to this point is an ugly one, but to a very good team very early in the season. It feels like that they're getting farther and farther away from that loss simply due to the passage of time. And I don't know if that's fair to anybody else who ends up with one loss as well. Should Clemson end up with one and not win the ACC title? Like, that was still a real, I know it was to Georgia. I know it was week 1, but that was an ugly loss.
It's very ugly. It was very ugly. But I mean, look, if you're in a Power 5 and you're Clemson, you have a name, right? They have a name. Yeah. This is not what was it, 08, 09, whatever. Where TCU and Baylor, no, it was after that. It was way after that. TCU and Baylor were like 11-1, and neither one of them got in. Mm-hmm. But if both of those teams were 11-1 in the Big 12, and one of them was named Texas and the other or Oklahoma, they would have gotten in, right? Name recognition matters. Whether you want to admit it or not, it matters. And Clemson's got name recognition. And which is odd because, if you go back 15 years, they didn't have name recognition. They were not that program, but they are now. So it's going to, I mean, if they run the table, and their one loss, I mean, they're going to get in. Unless they, even if they lose in the conference championship game, they're still going to find a way to get in.
Speaking of Texas and Oklahoma, we'll get to the Red River rivalry in just a couple of minutes. I mentioned Oregon, Ohio State, and Eugene. I mentioned another former Rose Bowl matchup, Penn State, USC. It's now a conference game, and we'll lead our game previews off with an SEC death match in Baton Rouge where the Tigers just don't lose at home on a Saturday night. They'll host Ole Miss. We'll get into all of those next right here on BetQLU.
You've been listening to BetQLU, presented by BetMGM. If you missed any of the show, listen back anytime on the new and improved Odyssey app.
Are you ready, sir? Start your engines. Let's go.
Astros money line versus the Marlins. Johnny Cueto, no thank you. Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. How does this affect me personally?
Which is absolutely bonkers to me.
If you do the middle school math, is 117 yards per game that you gotta post each and every weekend.
I knew it.
Who has the upper hand? Do we think it's going to be the offenses, or do we think it's going to be the defenses?
How about Saturday's game? Let's just throw a random game out here.
Like, I don't want to put faith in NC State. There's a chance we'll lose outright. Who knows? Jinx is definitely not paying attention right now. He's just vibing to the music.
Are you ready for the most interactive sports gambling show? Introducing BetQL's Send It In with PJ Glasser. We want to hear from you. Send It In is about your picks, your trends, and your fades. Share your thoughts, predictions, and your best daily best bets with the Send It In community. Set your reminders, mark your calendars, and get ready to send it in on weekday afternoons at 1 Eastern on Twitter, YouTube, and Twitch. On your home for wagertainment, the BetQL Network, presented by BetMGM.
Go for the betting cycle on BetQL with Cody Decker,
Cody Decker, former professional baseball player, turned professional smartass on the radio.
sports handicapper Rob Brown,
When Penix Jr. plays USC, he's getting 400 yards.
cycling all the top plays,
And Cody Decker, I think Florida can cover today.
and one outrageous show parlay.
1, 2, 3.
Let the chaos begin. It's Bet for the Cycle on the BetQL Network, presented by BetMGM.
Some would say that maybe he'll be chasing Super Bowl MVP. Really makes me angry that, like, Knicks fans can't have anything. We've been bad for... I get it. Now it's, okay, 100% of attention on 9 million games tonight. It's a playoff game. We've seen this movie before, and we know how it ends. And it ends with absolute disaster. But I'll tell you, that's fun. But the most fun thing about betting on sports for me is this. Like, hey, there's no tomorrow. And now, come on, put it in.
Are you ready, sir? Start your engines. Let's go.
Astros money line versus the Marlins. Johnny Cueto, no thank you. Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. How does this affect me personally?
Which is absolutely bonkers to me.
If you do the middle school math, is 117 yards per game that you gotta post each and every weekend.
I knew it.
Who has the upper hand? Do we think it's going to be the offenses, or do we think it's going to be the defenses?
How about Saturday's game? Let's just throw a random game out here.
Like, I don't want to put faith in NC State. There's a chance we'll lose outright. Who knows? Jinx is definitely not paying attention right now. He's just vibing to the music.
Are you ready for the most interactive sports gambling show? Introducing BetQL's Send It In with PJ Glasser. We want to hear from you. Send It In is about your picks, your trends, and your fades. Share your thoughts, predictions, and your best daily best bets with the Send It In community. Set your reminders, mark your calendars, and get ready to send it in on weekday afternoons at 1 Eastern on Twitter, YouTube, and Twitch. On your home for wagertainment, the BetQL Network, presented by BetMGM.
Some would say that maybe he'll be chasing Super Bowl MVP. Really makes me angry that, like, Knicks fans can't have anything. We've been bad for... I get it. Now it's, okay, 100% of attention on 9 million games tonight. It's a playoff game. We've seen this movie before, and we know how it ends. And it ends with absolute disaster.
But I'll tell you, that's fun. But the most fun thing about betting on sports for me is this.
Like, hey, there's no tomorrow. And now, come on, put Pickett in.
Let's get back to BetQLU, presented by BetMGM.
Live coast to coast on the BetQL network. It is BetQLU, presented by BetMGM, the sports book born in Vegas. A huge game in Eugene on Saturday night that'll decide who's still in, well, they'll both still be in the national championship conversation. Let's be honest. This is where some of those games, I don't want to say lose their impact in the regular season, but it'll definitely decide who the front runner is in the Big Ten going forward for at least the next few weeks. Another big Big Ten matchup in the Coliseum. We'll get into that one in just a few minutes as well. Penn State visiting USC. And we've got the Red River Rivalry as well to get to alongside John Martin and RJ Choppy. I'm Chris Mack. This is BetQLU every Friday night and Saturday morning right here on the BetQL network and on the Odyssey Sports YouTube channel. Don't forget, you can get us in podcast form whenever and wherever you'd like by simply searching for BetQLU where you get your podcast. Let's start, though, with what feels like a little bit of an elimination match on a Saturday night in Baton Rouge. And I say that because the 113th edition of the Magnolia Bowl, Ole Miss and LSU, last time Ole Miss won in Baton Rouge, by the way, 16 years ago, is going to have a huge effect on each team's playoff chances. How about this? Whoever loses this game, their playoff chances cut in half. LSU already at 14%. They would be slashed in half to just a 7% chance to make the playoff should Ole Miss win this game. Ole Miss, their playoff chances would be cut from 56% to 27% should they lose in Baton Rouge on Saturday night. They're favored by 3.5, John, total at 63.5. A lot of buzz about LSU in this one because they're coming off a bye. It's the 100th anniversary celebration at Tiger Stadium on a Saturday night in Baton Rouge. Ole Miss is banged up. I don't know. All of that stuff leans you in the direction maybe of LSU, but it still feels like to me that this Ole Miss team is just more talented, especially on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. I think it's lined correctly. I would have Ole Miss the favorite, but I just think when you start looking at the situation, anecdotally, Baton Rouge just a really, really, really historically hard place to win on a Saturday night. Ole Miss has Trey Harris banged up. I don't know if he's going to go. Obviously, that's an All-American caliber receiver there, and that's a huge, and will have huge implications if he can't go. I have not been high on this LSU team even before the season started. I'm not particularly high on them now. With that being said, if I was going to bet a side in this one, it would be LSU at home, simply just because I know, and you mentioned it, it's been so long. It's not a place where teams typically come in and win, especially with an entire week to prepare. So if I was going to bet a side, I have it. I like the over, especially if Trey Harris goes, but it would be LSU at home for me.
Yeah, it's this is interesting because Ole Miss has got that's not a great loss. The Kentucky loss is not a very good loss, and that concerns me about them. I get the coming off a bye is a factor here, but that doesn't work in the NFL. In the NFL, you're coming off a bye. It's literally a coin flip in the National Football League. A lot of games are in that league. It's not really fair to compare, but your first week back from vacation isn't your sharpest. Just go to your job, right? It's the sharpest week you've been around. I mean, it's Tuesday and you're still wondering what day it is. You're still wondering where you've been. So I don't know. I don't know that the bye that I'm really gonna lay into it, but a home game there. Road games in this conference are very, very difficult to navigate, and for that reason, I'm going to get the home team and I'm going to get points. And I'm generally a pretty good program that wins a lot. I'd probably be leaning that way.
Yeah, and I do think the injuries, John mentioned Trey Harris. Henry Parrish is less than 100%. They're dealing with Pagase and Uman Mielen also less than 100%. Probably both going to play, I think, but a lot of guys may play in this one for Ole Miss who are banged up. And to your point, Choppy, they're going on the road. Great defense, but going on the road to Baton Rouge against a really good offensive line, too. Mm-hmm. Like, the reason Ole Miss's defense has been able to wreak havoc is because they're getting to the quarterback. And this offensive line at LSU is like one of the best LSU offensive lines in a long time. Nussmeier's barely been touched. I think he's only been sacked twice all season. So you balance all of it out. And yeah, if you're giving me 3.5, especially still 3 at BetMGM, but I see 3.5 everywhere else. If you like LSU, then go get you the hook as well in what I think will be a really tight game. May get pretty wide open in the second half. I think that's a possibility as well. John mentioned the over. It's up in the 60s, but no reason I don't think not to go after that as well. And, it's entirely possible Ole Miss gets out alive, but this is just such a tight back and forth affair that if you can get the hook, it might be the best half point you buy all week in some kind of wild 34-31 kind of game in Baton Rouge on Saturday night. Saturday afternoon in Southern California will be the 11th meeting all time between Penn State and USC. Nittany Lions, number 4 in the country, 5-0 overall, 2-0 in the Big Ten, and this is a Big Ten game now. Penn State laying 5.5 at the Coliseum, where they haven't won, I don't know, since the early 90s. This is the first time these two teams have actually played in the Coliseum since 1991. USC won back-to-back Rose Bowl matchups in 2008 and 2016, or following those two seasons. Penn State, like 43% to make the playoff right now, increases to 63% if they can get the win at USC. But Big Ten teams traveling west, Choppy, to visit the 4 new Western members of the Big Ten, just 1-4 so far this year. Jimmy Covers, the legend, has not been covering this year either. Penn State just 2-3 against the spread. There are a lot of people that think this is an opportunity for Miller Moss to maybe eat a little bit after the struggles in Minnesota last week with the wind, only threw for 200 yards. He's put up some decent numbers this year, and Penn State's secondary is still dealing with some injuries.
It is, and like you said, travel for these kids is not the easiest thing in the world. I saw a story that Cal hired NASA to help them with their travel. The hustle on these college programs, acting like they invented East to West Coast and West to East Coast sports travel. Wild. Miami Heat do like a road trip to Golden State like every year. The Marlins go to Seattle. They go to San Francisco like every year.
Right.
The hustle on these programs. But, it is real. Like, we're talking about kids. We're talking about, a lot of these. I mean, this is a lot. James Franklin whining about the length of the runway in college state or in state college. Like
well,
what? Yeah, what do we do? Oh, you got to drive to Harrisburg. Oh, darn. Oh my God. So that's a tough spot. It's a tough spot for Penn State to be in, and it's one of those things where the time zone matters. To 18-year-olds, going 3 time zones appears to have a big impact. Look at Miami last week, who's a very, very good team. Now, they were playing a good team, but Penn State's a really quality team as well. They're playing a decent team.
John, this thing opened at 4, got out to like 5.5 even in some spots, has come back to there are still, I think there's a 4.5 out there in one spot, but I even see a 3.5 now as we look at it. If you like Penn State, and I think, look, Penn State is the better team. But if you want to buy into the travel thing being a thing this first year with the Big Ten being bi-coastal,
right.
But you still think Penn State can win, I think I'm okay laying 3.5. I don't see it getting to 3 anywhere by Saturday morning. I think I'd be okay laying the 3.5, but I do have some concern that Penn State's offense it's been like somebody who's never driven stick before, and they're first learning how to let the clutch out. It just keeps jerking and stalling at the light.
Exactly. I mean, it's kind of it's worked both ways, right? It's like the teams going east, the teams coming west. The new teams are struggling on the road. The existing teams are struggling at the new members' place, right? Like you're just kind of seeing that to a man. Like USC loses to Michigan at Michigan. They beat Wisconsin at USC. They go to Minnesota. They lose to Minnesota, and now Penn State is coming back to USC. So, you're kind of getting a buy low here, obviously, with a program like USC and this quarterback, Miller Moss. So, I think at 4.5, I'd probably have to be USC. But I do think this is going to very much be a back and forth game. I think there's going to be a lot of points scored in this game, and I think it's going to be probably one of the games of the weekend.
Yeah, total sitting right around 50. So if that's a number that you like, then and you think there is going to be some back and forth with both of these quarterbacks maybe hitting some big plays at some point, then over the 50.5 is a look there. Also Saturday at 3:30, the Red River Rivalry, the 120th meeting of the Longhorns and the Sooners at the Cotton Bowl. Oklahoma's won 5 of the last 6 and 11 of the last 15. But Texas is looking to start 6-0 Choppy for the first time in 15 years. And they're getting Quinn Ewers back just in time, who lit up the Sooners last year. Oh, by the way, Texas's defense has been elite this year as well, giving up less than 122 passing yards per game so far this year. And they're going to be facing the first true freshman quarterback to ever start a game for Oklahoma in the Red River Rivalry. 14, still a big number, though. 14.5 at BetMGM. I don't know. Ewers' first game back is the only thing that has me hesitating on laying the 2 touchdowns, Choppy.
Yeah, it's a little bit tough for me to do that. Last 2 times Texas has played Oklahoma, when Texas was the higher-ranked team, OU has won the game outright. OU's also done really well in this series, winners of 5 of the last 6. And I've seen this quarterback play. Like the last 2 games, he has done pretty decent. I think the under might be the way to go here on this one. I saw it as high as 50, and then obviously it's down to 48.5. So it's trending down. But Oklahoma does not get into shootouts. They just don't. They got a good defense. This is always, the crowd's always pretty electric there because it's going to be split 50-50. I think the under might be the way to go in this one. The Ewers rust, if you will, and the fact that Oklahoma likes to play a defensive game, I think 14.5 is too much, but I also think that's too high of a number.
Yeah, John, this thing opened up at 51, and as Choppy mentioned, it's steadily dropped throughout the week. 48.5 you may be able to search and find a 48 out there right before kickoff. If that's still there, the way this thing has trended down, the way the money has come in, I think I would just follow the lead there, follow the trend, and say, yeah, defense is going to rule the day in the Red River rivalry this year.
Yeah, I mean, it's different, right? I mean, I think Oklahoma realizes that if they're going to win this game, they're going to be competitive. It's not going to be, via a shootout, like you guys have said. I mean, that's just not the way that they are constructed this year. They've had real problems at that position. And so, you want to slow it down. You want to limit possessions, so I could not play the over in this one, and to be safe, if you think it's going to go under, then you probably are thinking that Oklahoma can keep it within striking distance. So 2 touchdowns in this game, that could be the play as well.
Yeah, it'll be interesting, too, to see if Texas should get a comfortable lead at some point in the fourth quarter, knowing that it's Ewer's first game back. And I mean comfortable lead, like 3 touchdown kind of lead in the fourth quarter. Are they then comfortable letting him go to the sideline, bringing in Arch? And what does that do to not just keeping the spread covered, but also pushing the total? Because they're not going to bring in Arch and just tell him to turn around and hand it off, Choppy. If they're bringing Arch Manning in to get him some reps late in the game, yeah, they want to run the clock out, but they also want to let the kid cook a little bit.
They're going to want to, yeah, because they want to see and they want to give him every opportunity because they know that he's going to be playing next year. And he'll play in this game next year. So they're going to want to get him some actual game action. It won't be a preseason game. It won't be the orange and white scrimmage game as it would be in Texas, where you're just looking to get somebody just out there. It's not going to be like that. They're going to actually play him, so that would impact the total and the spread.
Another bi-coastal Big Ten conference game will be a bit of a nightcap for a lot of us on Saturday night, and it's number 2 against number 3 in the nation. We'll get into that one next. Ohio State, Oregon. Are the Ducks for real? Are the Buckeyes for real, for that matter? A lot of question marks coming into this one, and we'll break them all down next right here on BetQLU, presented by BetMGM, the sportsbook born in Vegas.
You've been listening to BetQLU, presented by BetMGM. If you missed any of the show, listen back anytime on the new and improved Odyssey app.
Are you ready, sir? Start your engines. Let's go.
Astros money line versus the Marlins. Johnny Cueto, no thank you. Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. How does this affect me personally?
Which is absolutely bonkers to me.
If you do the middle school math, is 117 yards per game that you gotta post each and every weekend.
I knew it.
Who has the upper hand? Do we think it's going to be the offenses, or do we think it's going to be the defenses?
How about Saturday's game? Let's just throw a random game out here.
Like, I don't want to put faith in NC State. There's a chance we'll lose outright. Who knows? Jinx is definitely not paying attention right now. He's just vibing to the music.
Are you ready for the most interactive sports gambling show? Introducing BetQL's Send It In with PJ Glasser. We want to hear from you. Send It In is about your picks, your trends, and your fades. Share your thoughts, predictions, and your best daily best bets with the Send It In community. Set your reminders, mark your calendars, and get ready to send it in on weekday afternoons at 1 Eastern on Twitter, YouTube, and Twitch. On your home for wagertainment, the BetQL Network, presented by BetMGM.
Go for the betting cycle on BetQL with Cody Decker.
Cody Decker, former professional baseball player, turned professional smartass on the radio.
Sports handicapper Rob Brown.
When Penix Jr. plays USC, he's getting 400 yards.
Cycling all the top plays.
And Cody Decker, I think Florida can cover today.
And one outrageous show parlay.
1, 2, 3. Oh!
Let the chaos begin. It's Bet for the Cycle on the BetQL Network, presented by BetMGM.
Some would say that maybe he'll be chasing Super Bowl MVP. Really makes me angry that like Knicks fans can't have anything. We've been bad for. I get it. Now it's okay. 100% of attention on 9 million games tonight. It's a playoff game. We've seen this movie before, and we know how it ends, and it ends with absolute disaster.
But I'll tell you, that's fun. But the most fun thing about betting on sports for me is this.
Like, hey, there's no tomorrow. Now, come on, pick it in.
Are you ready, sir? Start your engines. Let's go.
Astros money line versus the Marlins. Johnny Cueto, no thank you. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. How does this affect me personally?
Which is absolutely bonkers to me.
If you do the middle school math, is 117 yards per game that you gotta post each and every weekend.
I knew it.
Who has the upper hand? Do we think it's going to be the offenses or do we think it's going to be the defenses?
How about Saturday's game? Let's just throw a random game out here.
Like, I don't want to put faith in NC State. There's a chance we'll lose outright. Who knows? Jinx is definitely not paying attention right now. He's just vibing to the music.
Are you ready for the most interactive sports gambling show? Introducing BetQL's Send It In with PJ Glasser. We want to hear from you. Send It In is about your picks, your trends, and your fades. Share your thoughts, predictions, and your best daily best bets with the Send It In community. Set your reminders, mark your calendars, and get ready to send it in on weekday afternoons at 1 Eastern on Twitter, YouTube, and Twitch. On your home for wagertainment, the BetQL Network, presented by BetMGM.
Some would say that maybe he'll be chasing Super Bowl MVP. Really makes me angry that like Knicks fans can't have anything. We've been bad for. I get it. Now it's okay. 100% of attention on 9 million games tonight. It's a playoff game. We've seen this movie before, and we know how it ends, and it ends with absolute disaster.
But I'll tell you, that's fun. But the most fun thing about betting on sports for me is this.
Like, hey, there's no tomorrow. Now, come on, pick it in.
Let's get back to BetQLU, presented by BetMGM.
A huge game in Eugene, Oregon, Saturday night. We get into it in just a moment here on BetQLU, presented by BetMGM, the sportsbook. Born in Vegas, week 7, going to be a banger. We got all kinds of huge games, and we'll get to the Buckeyes and the Ducks in just a second. Alongside John Martin and RJ Choppy, I'm Chris Mack. Don't forget, you can download us in podcast form as soon as the show is ready every weekend by just searching BetQLU wherever you get your podcasts every Friday night and Saturday morning, right here live coast to coast on the BetQL network, and also on YouTube on the Odyssey Sports channel as well. We'll get you our best bets in just a moment as well. But yeah, a Chip Kelly revenge spot. Chip Kelly, who made a name for himself out in Oregon about a decade ago when he was the head coach of the Ducks, took them to a national championship game, comes back with the Buckeyes as their offensive coordinator. And Ryan Day looking to win a big game on the road, maybe even. Number 2 Buckeyes at number 3 Oregon. The more interesting part of this conversation, I think, guys, with the Buckeyes laying a field goal on the road at Oregon, 3.5 in some spots, is each team's quarterback. I thought Dylan Gabriel would look a whole lot more explosive at Oregon through the first 5 weeks. He's completing nearly 80% of his passes, which is ridiculous. But while the Oregon offense has been very efficient, it hasn't been real explosive. And they're also struggling to finish drives. Like 67% of their red zone drives have ended in touchdowns. That's not good enough for a team that should be as dominant as the Ducks. And then you got Will Howard in Columbus, who, yeah, it's great. Ohio State's got nearly a 40-point margin of victory on average and is only allowing like 7 points per game. But Will Howard just doesn't push the ball downfield. Is that because that's what Kelly wants the offense and what Ryan Day wants the offense to look like? I don't know. Maybe he's not capable of it. And maybe their offensive line isn't all that great once they go up against a legitimate front like Oregon's. Mi amigo Juan Martin in Memphis. What is your read on this thing, man? Because I am leaning. What? Por la cultura, Choppy. I am leaning towards Oregon actually maybe breaking out a little bit here. Like I am not a huge believer in Ohio State. And I think maybe Oregon, especially at home, has an opportunity to prove that maybe some of the weird stuff that happened the first 5 weeks was fluky.
Yeah, gracias. Appreciate everything you do and everything you said. I do echo a lot of what you said to start the discussion, which was that this operation under Dylan Gabriel is much different than Bo Nix a year ago. They were what, 21-point favorites at one point over Boise State. That wound up being a field goal game, and it was very much in doubt until the end. It just hasn't altogether been that much more that smooth, I should say, and not nearly as dominant. And I don't know exactly why that is. I mean, obviously, I know they lost quite a bit. You lose Bucky, you lose some, but I still expected it to look better than it has. And Ohio State's a team that people are saying is the number 1 team in the country. It's the best team in the country. I don't know if I agree with that. I mean, we've been talking about Texas here on the show for a few weeks, and that's kind of where I'm at. But again, I just think the only way I could look in this one, as square as it may be, would be Ohio State -3 here.
I'm really proud of both of these teams. They managed to make it to week 6 without playing a ranked team and basically a real Power 5 team. It's impressive that you're able to do that. I was thinking, the Dylan Gabriel factor, I'm a little surprised because, I mean, he's been a good quarterback. Now, he hasn't been great elsewhere, but he's been a good enough quarterback. But the 80% completion percentage, I mean, he's throwing passes that probably the dude playing Tim Tebow in the Aaron Hernandez FX show could complete, right? He's just throwing like 3-yard passes right now. And that's a problem. Like, the offense just is not very good. When it didn't start off the year very good. I mean, they're putting up points. But again, I mean, they're not putting up points against the greatest teams that they've played. I think that this is one of those games where Ohio State, if they get into a roll, they could really start running downhill. But again, you're talking about road games, and road games in college football are just so difficult, and especially the first and second and third road games, of the year for these teams. And Ohio State, they play one road game at Michigan State. It's a good environment. It's nothing. It is nothing like Autzen Stadium. Autzen is just an insane environment. I might lean the 3.5 here with Oregon.
Yeah, and I think that's where I come down on it too. Like, not just the stuff that we've talked about. I know, Choppy, you're right. These colleges are acting like intercoastal travel has just been invented in the year 2024, but it's obviously playing a factor in a lot of these games. And I think there's a chance we see it play a factor in both of these bi-coastal Big Ten games that we've talked about this week. Like, I like Penn State to beat USC, but not to the tune of like 4.5. Like, I think it's going to be a lot more tight and a lot more uncomfortable for Penn State fans, this one included, than if it were being played in Happy Valley. Same thing goes for Ohio State, Oregon. If this thing's being played in Columbus, by all means, I'll lay 3.5 all day with the Buckeyes. But I don't think, no, you're giving me Oregon at home on a Saturday night, late Saturday afternoon, early Saturday evening out there, and you're giving me more than a field goal? Yeah. Like, I just wonder what happens if Ohio State gets down at any point in this game. And it's on the road at Oregon, who has a decent defense, and Will Howard is your quarterback. I know, like, I'm sorry, Will Howard at Kansas State is a decent Big 12 quarterback. Mm-hmm. Will Howard at Ohio State on the road at Oregon on a Saturday night? No, I'm sorry. That's not getting it done, and not with the Ohio State offensive line that isn't at an elite level either. I think they're like 40th according to PFF anyway in pass block rating. Like, if Oregon's front seven can get after Will Howard and force him into some mistakes, then by all means, give me Oregon, John, and give me the 3.5 at home. Again, that's where I come back around on this thing. These teams, these guys have played in big spots in high school and college, a lot of them, yes. But they haven't gone to a completely different environment like this is. This is, yes, it's a conference game right now, but it's a conference game in an environment that you've never played in before, like to Choppy's point, Autzen Stadium in Eugene on a Saturday night.
Oh, that's definitely true. And I mean, you're like we talked about earlier, you're seeing some culture shock from these teams that are coming from the Pac-12 and the Big Ten, and they're merging now. And whoever goes to the other spot first seems like they're the ones that get the culture shock. So it wouldn't surprise me if we do see that.
So a handful of massive games. Again, anybody that loses these games, these 4 games we talked about today, not necessarily out of the playoff picture, other than maybe LSU. Ole Miss even could probably afford a loss at this point and still win themselves back into the playoff picture. But like Penn State, Ohio State, Oregon, Texas, they can all afford a loss, but still massive games, especially for the teams that can't afford the loss, like, well, Oklahoma, like LSU. USC certainly is in a position now where they've got to run the table. It'll be interesting to see how teams play on the road as well in these massive travel games in the Big Ten. But time to get to our best bets. And Choppy, I'll let you get us started. What's your favorite play this week, or maybe if you've got a couple on the board for Week 7?
I really like Clemson minus 20. I think Clemson's undervalued right now. They're at Wake Forest. They've been rolling teams. Wake is not very good. I think Clemson, it's strange because they completely have rebounded from that Georgia game against the ACC and against the competition within conference. I think they win this one big.
Clemson back up in Choppy's radar. John?
That's right. We're going to go down to Boca, and we are going to lay the road chalk with North Texas, minus 6.5, minus 15, I think is the last I saw on that. Real simple. FAU has a quarterback that sucks and turnover prone, and now he has a fractured thumb. So he was throwing picks, or he's a sprained thumb. He was throwing picks before he hurt his thumb, and now he has a hurt thumb. So I think he's going to throw more picks. North Texas has a TCU transfer quarterback, Chandler Morris, who was just lighting up the AAC, man. He's just playing, target practice back there. They switched to a 3-4 defense two games ago from a 3-3-5, which everybody carves up in college football. And they've allowed just, I think, 27 points in 2 games since. So I'm a big fan of this North Texas team. I think they're getting better as the season goes on, and I'll lay inside a touchdown against an FAU team that I think has really nothing to play for and has a bad quarterback.
All right. I am going to go with, I can't believe I'm doing this. They're 5-0 for the first time in 33 years, and they've got a run game, and I think they found a quarterback, a kid who was once a Bama recruit, Eli Holstein, and the Pitt Panthers are hosting Cal in Pittsburgh this weekend. And it opened at 2.5, got out to 3.5, still there in some spots, but you can find threes on the board as well if you don't want to lay the hook. Pitt can score points. Maybe the over is the look in this thing too, even though it's big. It's like 58.5. But the look is Pitt to open a season 6-0 behind Eli Holstein, kid from Louisiana who is hooking up big plays for Pitt on offense. They're explosive on the offensive side of the ball. You got Cal traveling across the country in the other direction from what we talked about with some of those Big Ten teams. But also, I saw what Cam Ward did to them in the second half last Saturday night. And Eli Holstein may not be Cam Ward, but he's going to be a damn good quarterback. He already is looking like a good one as a redshirt freshman for the Pitt Panthers. So I'm going to go Pitt, laying the 3. I'll even lay the hook if that's all I can find out there. But right now I see 3s. So I'll lay the 3 with Pitt over Cal this Saturday afternoon at Heinz Field. I'll never call it Acrisure Stadium because that's a dumb name. We'll be back next week and every single week getting you ready, breaking down the upsets, getting you ready for the big games alongside John Martin and RJ Choppy. Don't forget to subscribe to make sure you get us every single week wherever you get your podcasts. To BetQLU, presented by BetMGM, the sportsbook born in Vegas.
You've been listening to BetQLU, presented by BetMGM. If you missed any of the show, listen back anytime on the new and improved Odyssey app.
Are you ready, sir? Start your engines. Let's go.
Astros money line versus the Marlins. Johnny Cueto, no thank you. Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. How does this affect me personally?
Which is absolutely bonkers to me.
If you do the middle school math, is 117 yards per game that you gotta post each and every weekend.
I knew it.
Who has the upper hand? Do we think it's going to be the offenses or do we think it's going to be the defenses?
How about Saturday's game? Let's just throw a random game out here.
Like, I don't want to put faith in NC State. There's a chance we'll lose outright. Who knows? Jinx is definitely not paying attention right now. He's just vibing to the music.
Are you ready for the most interactive sports gambling show? Introducing BetQL's Send It In with PJ Glasser. We want to hear from you. Send It In is about your picks, your trends, and your fades. Share your thoughts, predictions, and your best daily best bets with the Send It In community. Set your reminders, mark your calendars, and get ready to send it in on weekday afternoons at 1 Eastern on Twitter, YouTube, and Twitch. On your home for wagertainment, the BetQL Network, presented by BetMGM.
Go for the betting cycle on BetQL with Cody Decker.
Cody Decker, former professional baseball player, turned professional smartass on the radio.
Sports handicapper Rob Brown.
When Penix Jr. plays USC, he's getting 400 yards.
Cycling all the top plays.
And Cody Decker, I think Florida can cover today.
And one outrageous show parlay.
1, 2, 3. Oh!
Let the chaos begin. It's Bet for the Cycle on the BetQL Network, presented by BetMGM.
Some would say that maybe he'll be chasing Super Bowl MVP. Really makes me angry that, like, Knicks fans can't have anything. We've been bad for... I get it. Now it's, okay, 100% of attention on 9 million games tonight. It's a playoff game! We've seen this movie before, and we know how it ends. And it ends with absolute disaster.
But I'll tell you, that's fun. But the most fun thing about betting on sports for me is this.
Like, hey, there's no tomorrow. And now, come on, put